Great. So we're going to get started. So thanks everyone for joining for this workshop on video for change. How to create, share, and use video for impact and attention. This is co-organized by myself and Olivia. And we have 4 great presenters who are going to share some of their expertise. They have a really diverse range of experience, both globally and in terms of different types of video. So I really want to first express thanks to Priscila, Raja, Hans, and Enrico, and you'll get a chance to meet them. We're quite a small group, and we want to make sure this is most useful to you. So although we've been given a framework by the organizers, we also just want to make sure that we know who's in the room and we tailor what we do to you. So I'm hoping we can do just the very briefest of just name and what you do so that people can think, okay, how do we make sure this is relevant? And we'll just do that very quickly. If people can just do the 10-second kind of version of yourself rather than the 3-minute version. So maybe Olivia.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Olivia Ma, and I'm the news manager at YouTube. I've been at YouTube for about 4 years, working on news and politics-related projects. And my specific area of passion is sort of the world of citizen media and how video can be used to tell stories that aren't otherwise being told.
So we're going to take just a couple of minutes to frame the landscape, and then we're going to pass over to each of the presenters to give a sort of 8 or 9 minute insight into what they know, the key points they want to bring. They work across a range of experiences, and then we'll use the second half of the session to break out probably into 2 groups to do some workshop exercises, discussion, really choose where people want to allocate their time and their effort. So just obviously the overall landscape of video, we're seeing an incredible explosion of usage. This is an image from Egypt around Jan 25th last year with this incredible diversity of people capturing video images from the semi-professional camera through to the cell phone. Of course, a lot of that is driven by mobiles. This is my favorite New Yorker cover, which captures that perfect combination of the power of the mobile and the slight creepiness, and of course, the underlying privacy concerns that come with this ability. One thing I want to highlight, and I think this is important, is an understanding of where video is going and the changes and the shifts. So this 1G here represents the number of people who use 1 gigabyte of data a month, which is really the people who use video on a mobile device, because video is pretty data intensive. And at the moment, that's about 0.5% of mobile users around the world, so it's pretty small. The prediction is in the next 5 years, that will go up by a factor of 120. And a very large part of that will be driven by people starting to use smartphones that use video and create video. So I think one of the things we've been looking at in our work is how you start to look ahead to a massive expansion of video creation and what that means and how we tap into that, how that's used for social justice work. Of course, this is also driven by the spread of mobile access. This is a statistic that I'm trying to represent from the Middle East and North Africa, where you're going to see a 36 times increase in mobile data traffic in the next 5 years, even from what we have now. And what that leads us to is something similar to what's happening in the US now. And you can see the pink sort of band there is the increase of video in terms of total traffic. And you can see it kind of sucking up the space of the internet. And so how do we think about that expansion? And we mentioned it this morning, but one key sort of indicator of that, one catchy way to think about it is, of course, that 72 hours of video that is uploaded every minute to YouTube. So that's one side of the dynamic. The other side is that's obviously feeding and supporting a real increasing diversity of ways people use video. That's what we want to talk about today. We're going to be looking at situations where it really is about citizen witnesses, citizen journalists, people using live video. The thing at the top there is, in fact, one of the users of Bambuser, the service that Hans runs from Syria. But also people who are still at the other side, essentially, of a digital divide. And so I want to manage our sense of optimism and the direction things are going while recognizing that there remains significant skills and access divides, and also a continuing significance to how people create produced content, often for organizations and entities. So how do we think about those 2 things? And then, of course, the importance, and this I really want to highlight in those bottom slides, of the 99% of people who share. Really only about 1% of people create video, perhaps even less, but 99% of people share it, comment on it, deploy it, use it. And how do we think about that incredible potential? It's not only the potential of creation, but the potential of sharing. So
maybe just talk a couple minutes about
yeah.
YouTube's policy. So one thing that I just thought I would give 2 minutes of sort of background and context on, because there was a lot of interest in yesterday's session, was a little bit of sort of YouTube's approach from a policy perspective to this type of content. I think there's a lot of, sometimes it seems a little bit like a black box. Okay, what does YouTube keep up? What does it take down? And so I thought I would just give a quick overview just to set the context as we go into the breakout sessions. So YouTube is, with that volume of content, right, the 72 hours of video every single minute, it is absolutely impossible to pre-screen. And that's would just not be feasible under any scenario that you could possibly imagine. So YouTube works on a reactive model. We have a flagging system, and this is how most user-generated sites on the web work today, where we rely on the community to tell us what videos they think are inappropriate. And you'd actually be surprised. The community is really effective and very efficient at doing this in a timely manner. So when a video when you're watching the video on the watch page, there's a little flag that sits underneath the video that allows you to specify why you think that video should be removed, whether it's for extreme violence, sexual content, bullying, privacy issues. There's a range of different methods that you can use to flag that video. Once that video is flagged, it still remains on the site until a human being has actually manually reviewed it. So we have sort of a human-powered algorithm, coalition working to make this all work. And we actually have a team, a policy team that is spread around the world, that speaks many different languages, and that is constantly reviewing that queue and watching the videos and making a judgment about whether or not that video violates our community guidelines. The community guidelines specify all different ways in which we want to protect our users from harm. And they're making those judgments about whether or not to keep something up or keep something down. Our bias is always towards keeping something up. We believe strongly in YouTube as a platform for free expression. And so if there is any doubt, we will err on the side of keeping something up. This is particularly important in this type of video content because some of the stuff is video you would never see on television. You would never see it. It's extremely graphic violence. A lot of the stuff we've seen out of the Arab Spring, particularly in Libya and Syria now, is very difficult to watch. But I think YouTube and Google have recognized that it's important that the world have access to this information. We know that this is one of the only places in the world where you can see this. And so if a video has what we call EDS, educational, documentary, or scientific value, then we will keep it up. If that same very, very gory, difficult, violent video is uploaded in an area of the world where there's not some type of political conflict, then we might take that video down. So we try to look at the context in which that video is uploaded. So I'm happy to answer questions about that later, but just wanted to give that as sort of a framework for how YouTube looks at this content.
Great, and now we'd like to pass over to the four experts. And we have these four presentations. First, Priscila talking about video as a Swiss Army knife. Rico talking about the experiences of EngageMedia working in Indonesia, which has both high connectivity but also extensive rural areas with far less connectivity. Hans talking about live video, and then my colleague Raja talking about the challenges of citizen documentation in crisis. So I'll hand over directly to Priscila.
Good morning, everyone. Anyone there? So I was reading my Google Alerts this morning to keep track of our advocacy targets around the world, and I came across a quote from a government which will remain unnamed just because it's not relevant which government it is. It was leaked from an internal memo of this government talking about a video that had leaked showing army and police abuse in that country. And the quote that was leaked, it says, "Remember, it takes only 10 seconds out of hours of video footage to cause irreparable damage to the image of soldiers, the army, and the state." So I like that quote because it really talks about the power of sorry about that, the power and the potential of video, not just to promote or to spread the word, but also to create concrete change in policy and practice, in law and in behaviors that violate human rights. So that's really at the core of what Witness believes. We believe that video, if used strategically, if used smartly, if used tactfully, it can really create powerful change in people's lives. And that's the reason why we do what we do. And my laptop is not working. How many of you have ever owned a Swiss Army knife? Okay. I have never, so I really needed to research like what are the tools on that. Think about this Swiss Army knife in a very peaceful way, if you will. I'm not advocating violent action by any means, but think of it as a tool, and think of video as a tool that can do several different things. So what I want to do here today is just talk about some of the ways that activists, human rights defenders, NGOs are using video for advocacy around the world. So one thing that a Swiss Army knife can do is open cans, right? In a human rights context, I like to call that opening cans of worms, right? Exposing things that people don't really want you to see. So I have 3 video examples here. One is from an amazing video advocacy group in Israel called B'Tselem. This example right here. What they do is they equip community residents and community members to use video to document any violation or any abuse that happens. So this video was actually shot by a security camera in a supermarket, and it shows undercover forces detaining a 13-year-old boy in a supermarket parking lot in East Jerusalem. So the fact that this video exists and that then it can be accompanied by legal advocacy and by other forms of advocacy to A, show that it happened, yeah, and B, to show the circumstances in which it happened and to give this community a really powerful weapon to defend itself, yeah. So that's one example. Another example on the right, has anyone seen the Greenpeace Kit Kat video? No? It's a 1-minute spoof. It's a very interesting example of how you can parody brands and corporations to expose different links that cause violations, right? So what they did is they made a link between the Kit Kat chocolate and orangutans that lived in the forest where the ingredients to make that chocolate were being made. And it's a very interesting video because it shows you eating the chocolate, and then it makes the link between how that chocolate and what's used to make that chocolate then leads to a chain of malpractice and corporate abuse that needs to be changed. So it's an interesting campaign. It was a 1-minute, very different language than most human rights videos, but still an interesting tactic, yeah? And on the bottom, has anyone seen this Sri Lanka video? Show of hands. Yeah. So this was a video that illustrates an interesting and quite troubling trend, which is perpetrators themselves filming themselves committing the most awful abuses. We see this time and time again all over the world. You see this a lot right now in Mexico with the narcos, competing over who can make the more gory videos of executions and using that as a weapon to terrorize each other and society. This video was shot on a mobile phone, supposedly by a perpetrator as well, and it shows the Sri Lankan army executing someone extrajudicially. So these are 3 different examples, very different, and this video was used in an international inquiry. The UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Killings investigated it, concluded it was authentic, and that led to a whole host of actions at the international level around this video. So just in terms of tools, I'm calling this slide video to expose. Yeah, video to open cans of worms and to expose things that people would prefer you didn't see. Okay? The next use, the scissor on the Swiss Army knife. So I'm calling this cutting through the BS. Yeah, cutting for the non-native English speakers, cutting through the bullshit. Yeah. And how you can use video to counter stereotypes, to counter narratives, and to really tell a different side of the story that may not be getting out there as much. Do I look illegal? Is anyone familiar with this campaign? It's here in the US. Yeah, I'm seeing some heads. So this campaign emerged after Arizona passed legislation, the state of Arizona passed legislation basically allowing law enforcement officials and police officers to ask people for their immigration status documentation at any time, right? So many immigrant advocate groups consider this legislation to be basically legalizing ethnic and racial profiling in law enforcement, and there was a lot of advocacy done around this law. So this was an interesting video which basically took different people that look differently and asked, do I look illegal, right? So how will you know what someone illegal looks like, right? So it's an interesting visual argument, and it really made the advocacy point quite clear, which is, you're really basing this on how someone looks, and that's not a legitimate place to start the conversation, yeah? The one on the right was made by one of our local partners in Brazil. It's a campaign that we're working on now to stop forced evictions that are being caused by several different reasons, including the preparations for the World Cup in 2014, which as a Brazilian, I hope we win. I just don't want anyone to lose their homes because of it. And the Olympics in 2016. So this video is a very interesting video. What the government is saying always publicly and officially is that these evictions aren't happening. And if there are any cases that are illegal, they're isolated incidents and they don't reflect the systematic pattern of what's happening, right? And we know that that's not the case. So this video shows the moment. This is a community resident that we see the silhouette. We're seeing the scene from his point of view. And the two people that we see in the image work for the Rio city government. And they're there to tell him that he needs to sign a bunch of papers to be relocated to a different area, right? But they don't have clear information, and when he asks questions about what's really happening to him and his community, they don't know how to answer it, and they literally turn their backs and walk away, which is a violation not just of local law, but of all international frameworks around how you resettle communities, right? So this is just evident proof that the proper procedure is not being followed, despite what the government continues to say and continues to repeat. So it's an interesting tactic, using video to document this irregularity and then thinking about who needs to see this video, who you need to shame and persuade and embarrass and spotlight to hold someone accountable for this abuse. And here at the bottom, you have a collective of sex workers in India responding to a documentary film that was made by a filmmaker about them. And they were not happy with the film. It's called Prostitutes of God. I think that provides a little bit of idea why they weren't happy about the film without even needing to watch it. And they were just not happy and not okay with how they were represented and how their stories were told. So they made their own video, and this video is a video in which they respond point by point all of the misrepresentations in the video and why that representation was not adequate. So I'm calling this video to counter. Yeah, counter stereotypes, counter narratives, counter official versions of what's happening or not happening. Just one thing I wanted to say in terms of a tip on how to use video to counter. We sometimes, as activists, want to make videos the same way we write research papers or we write legal briefs. And by that I mean we want to cite all of the articles and all of the laws and all of the human rights jargon and all of the frameworks. And I would strongly urge you not to do that, because video is a visual medium, yeah? So use video to tell stories, right? You shouldn't make a video the same way you would write a research paper. It should focus on people, it should focus on stories that are emblematic and that illustrate broader trends and broader patterns of abuse. And it should never go alone. So it should always accompany the research paper and accompany the legal brief and accompany a broader strategy, but it should never be your standalone tool. The next one is, so this I'm told is a little screwdriver, even though I never owned a Swiss. I'm getting some yeses, that's good. So this turning screws, yeah? So by that I mean, think of the screw as the politician or the decision maker or the influence maker. And you have the screwdriver, so you're turning that screw, right? You're putting pressure on that decision maker or on that influencer. This first example here on the right is one of our partners in Cambodia, also working on forced evictions. You see an activist with a camera, and she's filming the courtroom as another activist is detained for protesting against forced evictions. So this camera, in this instance, serves a little bit as a shield, right? It says, you know what, I'm not the only one watching. everyone who will see this video is watching, and if you live stream it, as Hans will talk about later, that's an even bigger potential, right? So it's a monitor, it's a watchdog quality. You're making sure that that's being seen and that that's being recorded. On the right, you have one of my favorite activists today, Willy, with the black shirt on the right. He's 17 years old, and he lives in a community in the state of Guerrero, Mexico. And this community has been fighting for 9 years against an imposition of the state government that wants them to kick them out of their homes, basically, to build a large dam. So they've spent 9 years resisting by every peaceful way you can imagine, from not allowing the machines to come into their lands, to legal advocacy, to public protests, and they're just really trying to say, this is our land, we have the right to that land, and you can't impose this project on us. You can't build the project over us. For the first time in 32 years, the state governor, which is this man with the yellow necklace, he paid a visit to the affected communities. It was the first time that a state governor had ever visited the affected communities. And they had a large assembly with more than 2,000 people. So what you don't see in the picture are the 2,000 people behind the governor. And Willy took a laptop and he sat it in the governor's lap, and he showed the governor a video of all of the violations and abuses the community had suffered in the previous 9 years. And he said, you're a new governor, you won saying that you're going to protect human rights and uphold dignity, so this is what's been happening to us, and you have the responsibility to do differently, to write a new story. So he faced the governor, and then he gave him a present, which was a T-shirt with the campaign slogan. The 2,000 people started saying, put it on, put it on. The governor really couldn't not put it on, so he put on a campaign T-shirt, which is now a key piece of their advocacy moving forward. And here on the bottom, back to Rio, you have activists confronting Olympic organizers who are visiting Rio to make sure everything's going well for preparations for the Games. And they interrupt an official meeting to say, you know what, this is what you're not hearing about the preparations. And the spokesperson is a 31-year-old single mother with her 6-year-old daughter who was forcibly evicted from her home without compensation, without prior notice, lost her job, had to live in an orphanage, and her story was brought directly to these Olympic organizers in front of the media, in front of the local government. And then a video was made so that the campaign can continue after that. So you don't just know about it if you were there, but you can continue to support the cause and the campaign by watching the video and forwarding the message. So this is what I'm calling video to pressure. This is more of a new use of how people are using video, I would say. Just curious, what do folks see here? What are the white dots? Starfield. Does anyone see anything else? Imagine, what's that? Dots, okay. Oh, the 4 big dots, okay. City lights, yeah. Glittery, sparkly, spangly. I love it already. I don't even know where you're going, but I love it. Stars. Okay, so yes, technically these are stars, but I'm going to ask you to look at them as YouTube clips. Okay, so we heard that there are 72 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute, right? It's a very large universe. It's a very large ocean. We're a very small drop, right? Or a very small star. So this is both a problem and a challenge for us activists. The challenge is, how do we use this amazing amount of content that's being used to strengthen our own advocacy messages? How do we take advantage of this material? Sometimes we don't need to make a new video ourselves. Sometimes this video content already exists, but it needs to be translated, systematized, consolidated, and compiled so that it has a storyline that unites the dots, right? So I think a really big challenge for us as activists is how we connect these dots, and one way that activists are doing this is by curating video. So video curation projects. These video curation projects, they seek to connect the dots, and by connecting the dots, you have a story of the sum of the parts, right? What do these connected dots tell you that them on their own do not, right? So if I have one dot of an eviction in Rio, it's easy for the government to say that's an isolated incident. But if I connect these dots and say I have 100 videos that talk about 87 violations, that have 48 testimonies, and that all support this message of the violations that are happening. That's a new way for us activists to think about using video in our campaigns and in our strategies. One example is Crowd Voice, who's doing this with videos in the Middle East. So aggregating, making sense of, translating, and compiling videos on similar issues to reinforce advocacy messages and to give it the larger storyline. And lastly, the bottle opener to me represents wine, which to me represents let's have a conversation. So another way that video is used is to invite conversation, right? To say, let's talk about this, to invite dialogue. And here I have two examples of how that's being done to mobilize affected communities. So this is Cambodia. You can see the laptop on a little chair. The laptop is being used to show a video which tells residents in eviction-threatened communities about what their rights are, and also shows how communities in other places are resisting evictions. Yeah. So this is community video to engage, to mobilize participation, and to stimulate greater resistance. And the other example is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's a campaign that Witness supported for many years. And here videos being used in the Eastern DRC to inform parents of children that have been fighting, either recruited forcefully or voluntarily enlisted in armed conflict. And the video was telling these parents what really happens to their children once they join these armed groups, and really stimulating parents to not encourage this and to not allow this because of the abuses and the violations that these children undergo during war. So this is just a really broad range of how activists and people on the ground are using video to support their work. I'll stop there and we'll have more time to talk.
My name is Enrico, like I was suggesting before. EngageMedia is where I work, engagemedia.org. It is an online video sharing site. We focus in, our scope is Asia Pacific, although at the moment our focus is mostly Southeast Asia. I just want to point out to you a little of our, well, that's our logo, but this is our concept. This is basically Australia, Indonesia, West Papua, Indonesia. We kind of put it upside down to get people to, yeah, so it's upside down to get people to think differently, or, with different perceptive. I'm also saying this because Lady Gaga, oh, sorry. I have to say I have to talk about Lady Gaga. Yeah, so Indonesia, Jakarta basically is threatening to ban the concert. And of course the running arguments is about religious insensitivity and all that. But it's more to it than that. It is true. We have somebody from International Crisis Group can fill in more details on that, maybe. But also, it's another form of thuggery. So there's a lot of economical aspects to it as well. The thugs are not getting the money, and et cetera, et cetera. No comments about Lady Gaga in Thailand. So today also we're going to talk about how to get your video seen by the people you want to see it, which is basically distribution and public engagement. Putting up a nice looking video on YouTube is not going to help if you have to be competing with Justin Bieber and Kim Kardashians, but you have to promote that. So that's something that people sometimes forget. So, does it work? Sorry. So I just want to show a little clip. I'm cheating a little bit here because Sorry, I got it. This is to show, oh, will it work there? This is just to show how different different videos, or you know, basically like what Priscila was saying as well. Videos can give different context to different ideas. I mean, again back to Lady Gaga, the running theme is Indonesia is becoming more and more radical, Islamist radicals and all that. But here's an example of how things are a little bit different.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
So basically the idea is punks still pray. It is about sorry, where did he go now? All right. So that video created a little bit of a spark in Indonesia. People started to discuss about the video. Of course, from the religious aspects as well, but also mostly about identities, how people can, express themselves with their own identity. And of course, there's a lot of comments. Oh, he has a beautiful voice and all that. Yeah, unfortunately, he was lip syncing. But nice try, nice work. So we're talking also about this hybrid distribution. That's how we distribute videos and spark change, hopefully. And to do that, we have to do it with different platforms, online, and like Priscila's favorite activist, Willie, just putting it on laptop and showing it to people, or going to villages. We love the internet, Google, but sometimes that's not the answer. Of course, we have to go offline. It's not pink like that, but it's also a flip cam, which sometimes can be used in different situations. Bandwidth, when you decide to use internet, bandwidth can also become an issue. Whether 30-minute Kony video would play well in remote Indonesia, for instance, or whether a 2-minute low-resolution videos, campaign videos, can mean more. So there's a lot of considerations that we have to make. And I guess in the end, we have to be flexible with technology. Don't think about technology is too much, because the answer is us. Yeah. I added in this as well because there's some questions about why EngageMedia was made. Why don't you just use YouTube? This was before Olivia and Sam worked together on this. Security and censorship. There's a lot of cases where videos on YouTube, like being flagged or taken down. Not so much taken down, but also being blocked by the countries. And grassroots supports and trainings. We wanna go down. We wanna do the groundwork. We have to do the groundwork. So yeah, to be closer to our users, basically talk to the community, to the filmmakers as well, and of course, our religion, Creative Commons, and getting promotion also comes from us as well. We try to promote the videos. by various means. And again, but being independent also has a lot of limitations, technical development and audience. In the old days, when I do presentations, I would talk about YouTube being only. You can't really upload high resolution. You can't really screen high resolution videos, but of course that's not the case anymore. But it's hard to keep up. Being independent, it's hard to keep up with the technology and also with the various technical developments. So why we need independent space? Because one of them is because of this video. This is a Singapore video, One Nation Under Lee. Lee is Lee Kuan Yew, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, who is very, what's the word? Well, he's not the Prime Minister anymore, but his control over the country is still very evident. I mean, people still see the nepotism, the coalition, and so basically you can't really do much around that. And when Silan Palai, the filmmaker who did this film, released this, of course he was immediately banned. And it was banned. Of course, he won't be able to screen it anywhere. So he put it up on YouTube in little pieces at that time, 10-minute pieces, because it's a 1 minute, 1 hour film. And I don't know. I think the government blocked it as well. So it's you can see it on YouTube, but not when you're in Singapore. I don't know about now. So video action plan. So again, when we're doing distribution and hoping to create public engagement, there's some questions we need to answer. This is a scene in West Papua where people were arrested because they were part of this Congress that publicly state that they want independence. So some of the questions that were raised is when making this video is what is your message basically? Who is your audience? I mean, we can't always see that we want the general public to watch it. What do you want them to do with the information? You want them to just screen whether the pass the video is wrong and do screening. Is that enough? And how will you move them as well? You don't want to just create a video, a sad story, where people watch it and then it's so sad and it's happening like 10,000 miles away, and I'll go to my lunch date now. Thank you. How will people access your materials? Sometimes you make nice things, nice videos, big videos, but it's really hard for the people in the specific targets that you want to move or create to create change to be able to watch the videos. And in the end, when people do watch the videos, how would you like them to pass them around? So basically, the video distribution workflow that we try to do is plan it to before producing it. We have to think about video distribution strategy first. Plan, compress. Big videos are nice to watch, but if you compress it to a nice size, it's easier to pass around and publish here and there. License, we have to juggle which kind of Creative Commons license that you want, or maybe you're sticking with a copyright. Publish the video, promote it, and then play with it. Basically, play with it as in you promote and you get the video to hopefully create some change from that. So lastly, I want to talk about one last video. It's called Ironic Survival. This is video from West Papua. From this little place called Merauke in West Papua. It's south of West Papua. So West Papua is the Indonesian side of Papua New Guinea, basically. So Papua, Papuan forests, like the Amazon, are the last two remaining ancient rainforests. And the Indonesian government now wants to clear 1.5 million hectares of forest to create this bread basket of the world. This is a food and energy estate project. So they're bringing in 44 multinational companies into the place, and yeah, basically they keep calling it food and energy, but it's mostly energy. I think they're 20% of food, and the rest are the good old palm plantations. So of course, this big project is affecting the people over there. I mean, they have to lose their own food to be able to create space for other people's food, basically. So this video follows Alex, not his real name, in the center, who is basically a sago farmer. Sago is part of it's a unique tree in Merauke, in West Papua, which is their main food. And he's a farmer, but he can't really farm anymore because there are no more of that trees. So and Alex is also from the tribe called Marin, who is that is very they live in harmony with nature. Each clan has the responsibility to protect different natural elements. So his clan is actually responsible to protect the sago trees, but there are no more sago trees, and that creates a lot of problem within the himself as well as the village and the community. So the story is one day we heard that a group of Yale researchers are going to present their research on the Merauke Food and Energy Estate. So we decided to call them. I mean, we were in West Papua at that time. We decided to call. We called them and say, hey, do you guys want a video about what people think about the big project? So they say, yeah, of course. So we went to this place. It took us about 7 hours on motorbike, which was fun for the first hour. So we shot it in one day, got back, we edited for a day, and then we uploaded for almost a day as well, because the bandwidth is really, really bad. And that's like 70 megabytes, and you upload it for 12, 13 hours. So it got to Yale. They screened it at the presentation, and since then it created a lot of movement back as well in the international world as well as in West Papua. And because of this video, EngageMedia became the number 3 most visited website in West Papua in around October last year, which is quite amazing. But of course, it created a lot of discussions, but not so much change yet. I mean, sometimes we have to be patient, I suppose, but sometimes time is also at the essence, and hopefully in the breakout sessions we can chat a little bit about this video and how you can help as well to get this story across and make change. Thank you.
So a lot of my work, I focus more on the Middle East, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, I'll be referencing a lot of events just coming out of Yemen, Egypt, and Syria, but mostly Syria. I want to start just with a quote from an activist that I've been in contact with in Syria and Homs, Syria. He's a video activist, and he's been filming since the start of the revolution. And I'm sorry, I'm just gonna put this right over here. And has put his life on the line for the past 12 months and longer. And at one point I asked him, how much longer are you going to be doing this for? It's been over a year and you're still putting your life on the line. And what he told me was something that really moved me and really made me think about the power of video and telling your story, and how important it is to people who are being victimized and are living in communities where human rights violations are happening every day. And so I'm just going to give you a rough translation of what he told me. And he said, "I am a servant to my people. I am a messenger. As long as there are people listening to my story, I will continue to share it, no matter what the repercussions." And this really makes me think of how important it is for us to listen and continue to watch videos and validate what's happening there and in the Middle East and around the world. And it really shows how internet is being used as a platform to share stories. And in many parts of the Middle East, people are offline, and they resort to more communities, and that's where you find the squares like Tahrir Square in Egypt and Tahrir Square in Yemen. Like for Yemen, most people are offline; they don't have access to internet, and so they have that platform to really voice what's happening in their communities. And thankfully, in places like Syria, they're able to get that message across online and to the international community. So activists like Wasim are using internet, are using the internet and actively using video to capture the human rights violations in their communities, and that comes with a whole set of risks. And it starts with, well, the safety and security risks are the most obvious risks, and besides the obvious risks of being in a clash and filming on the ground and being in the middle of a barrage of bullets and bombardment of neighborhoods, there are also the risks of filming people who are potentially able to be targeted by perpetrators and security forces or the regime. So, in the example of Syria, at the start of the revolution and at the start of the uprisings, we kind of saw people really openly speaking out and telling their stories without concealing their identities. And then eventually, when there was that crackdown and targeting of activists, we kind of saw them shift and begin to conceal their identities, blur their faces, and find ways and methods based on their capacities and resources to conceal and keep the identities of the people that are in the video safe. And people who had editing tools would obscure and blur images. Others who didn't have access to that would just find more practical ways. For example, if there was a march, they'd begin to film behind the march and not really film the faces of the people at the march, but behind their heads, and have them flip over their signs so their stories and messages are still being told. And so they're really becoming more and more innovative, and as the challenges begin to change, so do their tactics on the ground. And so that's more safety and security. In terms of authenticating footage, that's also a major, major challenge coming out of all conflict zones. Citizen media is always, citizen journalists is a very new thing for them. It's a very new, it's a very new process for them. We're not really familiar with what are the media standards? What do people expect? If I'm filming for the media or human rights or for evidence or anything of that sort, this is a very new concept for me. So what people are doing now is that over time they've begun to develop this expertise and this knowledge of how do I film. And if I'm filming for the media, how am I going to film for the media? If I'm filming for evidence, how am I going to do this? And in many cases, for example, with media, you have tons of footage coming out, and then you have the perpetrators of the regime coming out and saying that's not valid footage, it's not credible footage, and countering it. So activists are learning to develop ways to really accompany their footage with data and information, dates, locations, filming landmarks, and that's how they're beginning to make their footage more credible. And also people who are broadcasting their footage, they're also doing their part in if they received footage that they weren't really sure was authentic, they wouldn't before they wouldn't just decide not to broadcast it, but they would crowdsource and contact activists and others to validate the information. And they would do that either by looking at the footage carefully, looking at building structures, dialects, and asking other activists who might have been there how if the footage was authentic, and by sharing other footage. And so there are ways to work around these challenges. And in terms of distribution, depending on where you are in the Middle East, whether you're online or offline, again, I'll give you the example of Syria, with Syria, where you have places in Syria where you do have internet access and places that are offline. And a place like Homs, most people are offline, but you do have a select few that are able to manage to get internet. Again, this is a challenge. People are now beginning to take their footage and go across borders, carry them on memory cards, on USBs, and smuggle them across borders to get that footage to the international community. And that's their main objective right now, is to share it with the world, to share their story with the world. And so you do have people inside of Syria uploading the footage, which isn't really the ideal situation because of those who do have internet connectivity, it isn't always the best internet connectivity. And so they're relying on a lot of groups who are working outside in diaspora and in other parts of the world, Syrian groups who are taking this footage on the border, from these borders, taking their memory cards and uploading the footage for them and sharing their stories. And there are many places like this all over, mostly across the Middle East, but activists across Europe and even here in the US are working to get that footage disseminated to the media. And a few examples is with Syrian Electronic Gate, which is a database meant to serve the media. And there's a lot of video content that they upload that is specifically targeting media. And then you have activist groups, which are dedicated to also keep maintaining that network with activists on the ground and collecting that footage and disseminating it also with the media. And there's one in particular that I want to talk to you about. It's the Activist News Association, and they're based in Cairo. And they're made up of a staff of just Syrian activists who had fled Syria. And it's interesting just to see that to have all of these activists that are there, former activists that were on the ground. And so what you see there is also, it's kind of become a base and a safe haven for activists who smuggle themselves out of Syria and share their information and come and get trained and go back into Syria to share the information that they learned. And so there is this kind of support outside of Syria, which is really important in getting the information and content out. Another thing I want to talk to you about is also the challenge. It's a major challenge, and it's an important part of video advocacy and sharing and sending and really portraying our messages. And in the Middle East, it's been quite the challenge since the start. It's a very new concept for us. You know, we're not really used to using video, and we're not really used to even having the freedom to speak out. So this is all a very new thing for us. And so we at the start of the uprisings last year, most of what we saw was raw footage. And now we're beginning to see a shift and people really learning that sending out an overflowing YouTube or the internet with huge amounts of content and thousands of videos a day isn't really the ideal situation to really attract people's attention. It's usually going to fatigue the viewers that are watching and really leave them confused and not really understanding what the story is. Because a lot of the videos that are being posted right now are maybe compelling, but again, you feel lots of compassion, you want to help, you're moved, but you really don't understand what's really happening. You don't have the full story. And so what activists are beginning to do now is, and what Priscila had touched up on, is really begin to tell stories. Take separate videos and connect them and show how everything is really connected and how this is not just one issue in this with this one person, but it's an issue across the board. And now rather than just having video footage of corpses and torture, they're giving names this is Hamza, and he was a child that was tortured, and he went to this school, and he liked to ride a bike, and so giving his story, having his family members give testimony, and that's a very, very, very important part when thinking about how you want to appeal to a broader audience and to an audience that's not necessarily used to watching graphic images and used to watching footage and used to even living in a conflict zone. So, and that's something that we tend to forget. People who live in conflict tend to forget that. They tend to forget that people who are viewing their footage are people who are very distanced because they don't live in situations like that. So there's a different method and approach that you have to take with that audience. So during the breakout sessions, we'll talk more about this and get into further detail. And yeah, so thank you so much.
Let me just say a few words about Bambuser. I introduced it briefly. The browser-based solution is what you can find on Livestream and Ustream. But we have a very smart solution for mobile phones, and what's most prominent with it and why it's being used by activists is primarily it's because it's supporting such a wide range of handsets. So you can broadcast from any iOS device, any Android device. We're supporting Symbian, so pretty much all Nokia smartphones can be broadcasted from, which is strength done in the Middle East, North Africa. We support Samsung's BADA and the cooperation between Nokia and Intel, which is called MIGO. We don't support RIM because their API sucks. We're working on Windows 7. We'll see if that be a success or not. Here's just a few examples how Bambuser is being used by activists. Top left is from Russia. This is 2 weekends ago. A guy was broadcasting anti-Putin protests, and he was arrested 3 times during the same day. So we could follow him in and out of jail and the transportation there, which is quite fascinating. We had another example over Christmas. A guy who was dressed as a Santa Claus was arrested, taken to the police station. He was broadcasting with Bambuser. I remember Bambuser is interactive, so you can chat with the broadcaster. And he was interrogated by the police, and he was given legal advice via Bambuser while broadcasting that interrogation, and he finally got out of it. Interesting with this is 2 weekends ago, there were a lot of anti-Putin protests broadcasted with Bambuser and with Ustream. The day after, both companies experienced DDoS attacks, so both sides went down, and the broadcast came out from Russia, and plenty of demonstrations took place that day. Speculation on Twitter was that it was federal Russian security that was behind it. I don't know. These some Occupy guys in a paddy wagon in New York. The down right is Homs, Syria. We see like it varies a bit, but something between 100 and 300 live videos coming out from Syria every day from all parts of the country. Top right is Egypt, massively used during the Arab Spring, and it's continued to be used a lot by Egyptians. We believe that a live video is powerful, and that for many reasons. And the main reason I would say is raw and unedited content, which is simple to verify. The distribution is imminent of it. We have a distribution deal with Associated Press, where Bambuser users can opt in to distribute videos via AP, and I see how they do it. And it's quite a simple process. When the video comes in, they call someone up who has lived in the area and ask him if he can see that it's the area. And if he approves to that, then they check the weather report. Is it the same weather there? Then the weather report says they check the dialects, street signs. So a video can be out and aired in minutes from when it comes in, which is really powerful. The interaction is also important. You can interact with the person who's broadcasting. We see plenty of examples where people been talking to broadcasters who's been sitting in places that have been shelled, who's been shot at, and having a dialogue like that is such an emotional thing, and viewers can interact in between themselves as well. So it creates what I call like a social emotional aspect to it that you never can experience with an on-demand video. I think one thing also that means to me that we're powerful is that we've been blocked in quite a few places. We are blocked in Syria. They managed to get videos out. We're blocked in Kazakhstan. We're blocked in Bahrain. We're one of the first services that were blocked in Egypt. And I think we're going to see the service being blocked in other places as well going forward. I think what's happened over the past 6 months is that live video has changed the world for activists. it's no longer TV media only that can broadcast live exclusive pictures from places with unrest, and in some cases they don't have an opportunity at all, like in Syria. So it's the man in the street who carries a mobile phone and has the power in his hands to broadcast and supply the world with what's actually happening. I think it was like 4 or 5 months ago, first time ever that user-generated live video was aired live on all major news channels in the world, like BBC, CNN, Sky, Al Jazeera, etc. And the total reach of that specific video, I think it was up to 2 billion people. That was a bombing of an oil pipe in Homs, and we've seen pretty much on a daily basis for a while Bambuser videos being aired live on the news channels. And with our cooperation with Associated Press, it's pretty much that every week Bambuser videos is the most used video content AP puts out. I think it's also important morally for activist groups to get this distribution, knowing that the world is actually watching, and we can supply them with numbers of how many actually seen this video, seen this footage. It's a moral boost to them, and they know the world is looking, but they're frustrated knowing or seeing that nothing is happening, particularly in Syria, I would say. There are quite a few factors in order to make it successful. You need connectivity. It's not simple everywhere in the world to get that connectivity. The global media climate is of course, if no one cares about what's happening, like, you know, nothing's going to be written or said about it. But I think the Syrians have done it extremely well in building that interest with their videos and creating media contacts and media relations and getting the world's attention to the situation in the country. Distribution, of course, is super important, and also here it plays in, of course, how good you are at creating that media relationships and building a trust with individual journalists and news companies. What Syrians have done extremely well as well is to create media teams, so they're easily recognizable, they're easy to reach, they have spokespersons, and they have spokespersons that speak English, and they have availability pretty much 24/7, which has made their play a much easier play towards media, I think. And we're not going to have breakout sessions, and I think I got that to 8 minutes. I can speak fast when I need to.
So I have speakers who have lots to tell, and as you can see, Hans has a lot to tell, and I encourage you to, to also look at Bambuser, to look at the EngageMedia site, to look at the Witness site to see more. I think we've probably got space for just if there are 2 or 3 questions or that have come up that people wanted to put out to take those. So if anyone has a question for one of the speakers, please speak up. Go ahead. Did you? Yeah.
I think this is amazing and the use of video is fantastic, but I just have concerns about privacy and consent. If you're it's sort of like the journalist who walks into a village somewhere and starts videoing them. And it's very useful when it's sort of the West Papuans, it's driven by them, but the notion that you could just walk in anywhere and video people and expose them. What is the, I don't know what sort of recourse people have. I don't think laws are updated to protect them from that and for it to be instantly uploaded. I'm not talking about a situation where there's, a brutal human rights violation occurring or, bombing in a civilian area. But it seems to me that, that is somewhat of a concern. I'm wondering how people in the community sort of reckon with that.
I can give one perspective and then maybe turn over to Hans. It's been a huge concern for us at Witness to how to think about how to more broadly share an understanding of what consent means, because I think that we haven't really updated it or made it translatable for people who are not in a news environment or a human rights environment. And so we've been doing that, trying to think of very simple ways to encapsulate and share that, to encourage people to think about it, and also to build tools that help people think about how you make easier choice points on things like anonymity and privacy. I think at the moment it's quite hard to obscure people's faces in an image, so often people get stuck in there, and you're trying to get it up quickly. So one thing we've worked on is a tool called Obscuracam that you can anonymize faces on a cell phone as you film, so that it becomes much easier. We also think there are solutions at a platform level. YouTube has been working on an anonymization tool that people can use at upload. So I think you've got to have solutions at different points that give people the tools to respond to the principles. And I think you've got to help people understand the principle of consent. Hence, it's a huge issue with live video. I don't know how you deal with it. Do you want to come up to the mic? And
yeah, I can say a few words. Like with live, it's not much you can do about it, but our experience working with activists all over the world is that they have a good knowledge about, good thinking about it, being very careful about it. But also, if you look at countries like, for example, Russia and activists there, it's quite funny to see when activists are broadcasting anti-Putin demonstrations. You see the activists filming the police is filming the activists. So, like, I think people are aware that video capture is going on wherever they're moving around. And we had this discussion quite a few years ago regarding photos and privacy around photos, and that discussion just is faded away a bit. And the question you're asking is relevant, and it's taking that photo question back to and come in play again. But it's not much we can do. If someone feels that it's violated their privacy, we take that video down. We contact the creator of it, and we haven't experienced a problem so far where we haven't had anything that we couldn't solve.
I just wanted to add 10 seconds to that. The way Witness works is we equip people in communities, movements, people suffering the violations themselves to make their own videos. So we never parachute into a community and shoot a video. So it's really equipping people that are on the front lines of these violations to use these tools. And a part of that involves a really lengthy conversation on how to get informed consent. So how to make sure that when they film anyone, they talk through the potential implications of speaking on video, and also give them choices whether to appear or not, and think that through with the person being interviewed. So that's a very important part of the work.
But I mean, it's very important when you're taking an interview or having testimony or filming with someone. But when you're filming an event or a violation, you're kind of filming like groups of people. And in Egypt, at least, we've been seeing the army and the police using actually these videos and photos as evidence. And a lot of activists are not aware of this, and not aware of, or even if when they're aware, they know that this footage is very important and a very important tool. So they upload it, and they end up being used against these people who are taking the event. So I think tools like obscuring faces or being able to, I don't know, somehow not show the person's face or voice that are automatic on cell phones or on computers and very easy to use would be extremely helpful. So, I mean, sharing this, like these tools that we're guys talking about from Witness would be great.
Oh, sorry, just to add that 5 seconds. So this is part of storytelling as well, how to, tell the stories without revealing too much identity. I think that's part of the, so it's a lot of groundwork before the actual production.
That's a great point, yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, because of this privacy concern and not putting the people we are trying to help into the line of fire, I know for live video it would be very difficult to deal with. And if the activists are sensitized, then okay. But is there any way that digital story making can be used to sort of blur images or make them into some other form so the faces are not visible, and the same video can be sort of used on that platform?
I think absolutely. I should say about the tool that Witness has worked on, it's one called Obscuracam. And it's aimed at making it very easy to obscure faces. But I think what Rico says is important. You know, there is good storytelling that doesn't necessarily show people's faces, that gives you a sense of the context. I think one of the contradictions that we've been wrestling with is when you anonymize, you lose some of the data that helps authenticate and prove it to news sources. One of the ways we've been dealing with that ourselves is to also look at tools that enable people to add data to particular videos, but only to share that to people they trust, and then for the public version to strip out data. Because I think we have this contradiction between wanting to have a lot of data and be able to prove stuff and wanting to protect people at the same time. And it doesn't need to be completely contradictory. It's about how we have control and can share information.
I'm new at this, so this question, though, is how often is privacy used as an instrument of the regime? In other words, are peace officers and army officers assumed to have a right of personal privacy, and when they're videoed, what happens?
There have been a number, this varies very much by country, and there have been some cases around this. Actually, there's a sort of a somewhat, I guess, notorious case from Egypt around something called Piggypedia, which was a site that placed up images of police officers, some of which seized from the secret police archives. And that was controversial when it was placed on a public, on a commercial media sharing site, in this case Yahoo, Flickr, which is owned by Yahoo, because it was without the consent of those officers. Now, this is very complex. Clearly, activists generally assume that public officers or officials of the state in the fulfilling or not fulfilling their role in illegitimate ways are absolutely fair game, but it can get controversial when it moves into commercial spaces, and there was this big controversy over that. Did you want to, from Egypt?
Actually, nobody that owned this material talked to Flickr to take it down. Flickr did it on its own and took it down by its own. And at the same time, I mean, one of the most important videos of torture in the history of like Egyptian activism was like the torture of Ahmed al-Kibir. It's a torture video where you see like a policeman like sexually, basically raping one of his prisoners, and he was the person taking the videos. It was like police persons taking the videos. So when you're using the videos over and over, of course you're like, you know you're not respecting their privacy, you're not respecting their like property rights, but you're taking a choice, a moral and a political decision not to respect these rights because the right of the person being raped or being, and at the same time there's questions related to the person being raped. Are these like their privacy being respected or not when you're like using them for change or using them for like to end torture? So it's a very complex question, but I think it shouldn't be viewed within the context of law, but more within the context of political responsibility and moral responsibility towards the victim.
The Yahoo case is actually one we highlight in the Cameras Everywhere report that is on the tables, which looks at some of these big picture challenges, including the privacy challenge. I think we've probably got time for one more, and then we should head off to lunch if anyone has a burning question. So one in the back here. Anyone? Okay. Okay, great.
What is the thin line to decide what is published or not? Who decided? It's part of the same conversation. And a recommendation for the platforms and sites. I think it's important to educate or give to the people guidelines to how to make a video or make a storytelling with a video and photography also. I don't know why you don't speak about photography also, and just for video. No, that's two points only. Thank you.
So for the YouTube question, just to build on what I had said earlier, there is a team that looks at it and reviews and compares against YouTube's community guidelines. So the community guidelines is a set of principles that YouTube uses to essentially, try and create a community and a user experience on our site that's safe and that doesn't promote harmful behavior. But it's subjective, and that's why we rely on the community to tell us what they think needs to be reviewed, and there's a team, and I think the team would has a way of evaluating these videos that's fairly systematic, but there's always going to be mistakes that are made, and I think the team is very open to re-reviewing decisions that have been made, and we do this every day and reverse things and say, you know what, we took this video down, it really shouldn't have been taken down, and sometimes it needs to be flagged by someone that's closer to the matter to say why that video needs to stay up. But it's very, there's a lot of gray area. And regarding the privacy stuff, YouTube has a pretty sophisticated privacy takedown policy as well, which requires either the person, one of the people identified in the video, or someone that represents them to approach YouTube and say, we need this video taken down because I am the person in this video and I want to take it down. Now, there are exceptions for public figures or people that are in the news, that are newsmakers, and so those people will be considered exceptions to those rules, to the privacy rules.
Just if I'm a police officer brutalizing a citizen, am I entitled to have my video?
I would say no. I'm not going to say no. I can't comment on individual video specifics, but in that case, if it's something that would be considered a violation of law or a newsworthy item, then in all likelihood, no.
But would you respect the laws of? I mean, YouTube is probably registered in the U.S., right? So say under Japanese law, it's illegal.
Yes.
To depict, but YouTube is.
We adhere to local law. Yes, when we're launched somewhere. So it's important to note that YouTube is officially launched in about 40 countries, which when we launch somewhere, it means that we look at the local law and adapt our terms of service and community guidelines to that local law. There are many places where we're not launched, but we actually launched in 7 MENA countries after the Arab Spring. We start to see so much movement there. So.
Okay, let me just finish up replying in terms of, I think there's room for all the tech companies and the online platforms are increasingly the spaces people do this. So I think there's always continuing room for improvement on how the transparency of the process is, the role they play. And it's certainly something that I think from the activist community, the human rights community, the continued emphasis on doing that is important to really understand that role. Yeah, and Google obviously doing that. We've just launched this collaboration with Storiful on a channel on YouTube there to really sort of find a way to frame the human rights content. And part of the goal there is also to provide tools to people to do this well, because I think you've got to do that within the platforms that people use. So I think that's part of it. That's why we didn't get to photo, because it's 12:40 and it's lunchtime and we've only talked about video. So I'm actually going to wrap us up just because it is the lunchtime and we're going to wrap up then. So thanks everyone.